Hello and welcome to a special episode of The Ultimate Sacrifice created by Bill Reisen. It's special to me because today I'm going to tell you the story of my father's life and service and sacrifice for our country. I'm Louis Marsh, senior pastor of River Church in Parker, Arizona, and today I'm going to take a look at someone who wasn't famous, didn't win a Medal of Honor, and someone you've probably never heard of. I'm letting my dad, Dan Marsh, stand in today for all of the so-called, quote, regular Joes, unquote, who did extraordinary things during World War II and beyond in service of our country. So let's get started. Daniel Z. Marsh was born in 1921, and like nearly everyone in his generation, his life was forever changed by two major events. First came the Great Depression in 1929. Like everybody else, Dad learned to work very hard, even as a child, and not waste anything. By the time he was in high school, the situation in Europe was headed towards war, and he actually debated what the United States should do in war as part of his school's debate team. Well, then came the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and nothing would ever be the same for young Dan Marsh. He had to wait for a few weeks to sign up because he needed a relative to sign for him since he wasn't quite 18, almost, but not quite. He opted for the Marine Corps and was shipped from Indiana to far-off Camp Pendleton, California. After basic and advanced training, he heard about this new group being formed. They would be the first to fight. They would fight behind the lines. They were hand-selecting only the best, so my dad was interviewed as a volunteer and was selected to become a Marine Raider. He was ordered to go to the 4th Marine Battalion, which was then led by President Roosevelt's son, Jimmy Roosevelt. Imagine that. He was part of Company Q, 4th Raiders, as they formed and served with them until the day that they were disbanded in 1944. The Raiders were the first of what we call today Special Forces, although my father always pointed out that the Raiders themselves never used that term, nor did they think of themselves as special or better than any other Marine unit. Dad and the 4th Raiders fought in New Georgia, part of the Solomon Islands, at Wickham Anchorage, Viru Harbor, and Bairoko. Bairoko was the only time the Raiders failed to achieve their objective. Even though the 1st and 4th Raiders were outnumbered by the Japanese, who were dug in, the Marines lacked any artillery, air, or naval support. They still came within a few hundred yards of capturing Bairoko before having to fall back. A few months later, the Marine Corps disbanded the 4 Raider battalions, and most of the Raiders were used to reform the famous 4th Marine Regiment. The 4th went on to fight in the liberation of Guam, and then, as part of the 6th Marine Division, the only Marine division, by the way, that has both formed and disbanded overseas, Dad fought throughout the entire battle for Okinawa. Now, Okinawa was arguably the worst battle of the war, and was certainly the last one U.S. troops ever fought during World War II. He told me that the uniform he wore on Easter morning when they invaded Okinawa were the very same clothes he had on 1 month later when the battle was over. In his book, Once a Raider, Dad talks about the toll that terrible battle took on him and everyone who fought in it, and how he never really was ever the same afterwards. Dad was in the hospital recovering from Okinawa while the Marines were training for the invasion of Japan. Then they got the news that they had been spared. Japan surrendered after the dropping of 2 atomic bombs. He once told me that the Marines' job in the invasion of Japan was to secure a bridgehead for the army units that would be landing behind them. They were expecting to lose about 1 man for every square foot of ground. Do the math on that. It's absolutely appalling. And I'm amazed that that was actually ever said to them by anybody, but apparently it was. None of them expected to survive, of course, but all of them were ready to go if called. Happily, they were not. And Dad's unit, the 4th Marine Regiment, were the first troops to land in Japan after the surrender. He arrived home at last, months later, and on a blind date met a young woman named Florence, who quickly became his wife and later my mother. They ended up spending the next 62 years together and persevered through good times and bad. Their first child, Karen, was born, and things were going pretty well. To help make some extra money, Dad joined the Marine Corps Reserve because all you had to do was go meet once a month, unless something happened, and after all, what could possibly go wrong? North Korea, that's what. Dad was called back into service, and almost as soon as he arrived at Camp Pendleton, he was shipped off overseas. Dad told me that the vets thought they'd be used to train the new guys. Instead, they were put on the first boat to Korea. He arrived too late for the invasion at Incheon, but did join A Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, 1st Marine Division, just in time to invade North Korea. And yes, that means he fought in the bloody Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. That entire campaign. About 10 communist Chinese divisions surrounded the 5th and 7th Marine Regiments, along with some other Allied forces. They performed an unbelievably heroic fighting withdrawal down one single mountain road. But towards the end of that, there was one critical mountain peak, Hill 1040, that had to be taken to free them up and to allow them to rejoin the 1st Marines. They were fighting just south of that, holding the road there. In a bloody 2-day assault, my dad's company and another company took part in that fighting, advanced up the mountain, and took that peak. Dad continued fighting in Korea for several months before, in the midst of a battle, he saw a friend of his and the entire mortar section wiped out in an artillery barrage. He started vomiting blood but wasn't physically wounded, so he tried to continue, but his company commander, who he had served with in World War II, told him he had done enough. Dad was medevaced out and came home. While he was in Korea, his second child, Monica, had been born. Slightly less than 2 years later, I was added to the mix as their only son. Through most of my growing up, Dad didn't talk much about his war experience, but as he grew older, he did a little. Finally, the great day came when he was contacted by a group that we didn't even know existed. The United States Marine Raider Association. My dad was thrilled. Sometime after that, Mom, Dad, and I went to our first Raider reunion, held that year in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and after that, he didn't miss one for years except when he was ill. After his death, I remained active in the association for many years as a tribute to my father. Now that the Marines have Raiders once more, I stepped aside and let the new generation take charge. They're doing a fantastic job, and I'm behind them all the way. I finally managed to nag my dad into overcoming his innate shyness, and he wrote the basis for the first ever website on the internet to be dedicated to the Raiders, and that's Dan Marsh's Marine Raider page, www.usmcraiders.com. It wasn't until after his death that I heard about this whole new thing, which I didn't know anything about, that you can actually publish books through Amazon.com. Anybody can do it, and it doesn't cost you really any money. So I took everything that he had written on the website, put it together, did some editing, added a few connecting places to it, and we published the book, which I mentioned earlier, called Once a Raider. I want to share with you part of what he wrote here. This is part of what he says about what happened after the battle for Sugarloaf Hill on Okinawa, one of the worst fights on Okinawa. We're done. Personal note, I was sitting on the edge of my hole about twilight, ready to dive in at the sound of incoming mail, when my thoughts began to wander. The air was murky with smoke and assailed my nostrils with that hideous combination of cordite and putrefying flesh that penetrates to the depth of your being. In the fading light, my surroundings seemed so unreal as I looked about. Suddenly, I realized that I knew this place. It was that strange netherworld I had once read about. This was the place of the dead. We were intruders because we were alive and did not belong. Strangers, so to speak. As long as we remained there, we would be walking a narrow plank, trying to keep our balance so we did not totter off the edge and no longer be a stranger. Quickly, I snapped my mind back to reality. Such wanderings of the mind are dangerous, so I turned to other things. The fact remains, however, that the Sugarloaf Complex will always be to me the place of the dead." Unquote. Daniel Z. Marsh passed away at the end of July 2008 after his last battle with severe illness. He died with the peace that only comes from a firm belief in Jesus Christ as Lord. The last time I saw him, he had one arm raised in the air and was trying with great difficulty to sing a hymn of praise to his Lord. Today, he and Florence are buried at the same plot at the Veterans Cemetery in North Phoenix. Dad won a lot of medals for his service, but he always told me that the real heroes were the ones who died serving their country. He didn't make that kind of ultimate sacrifice, but like almost everyone who engages in combat, he made other ones, along with some shrapnel that he carried with him. The mental and emotional scars that only combat can inflict stayed with him. He struggled with them his entire adult life and took them with him to the grave. Perhaps that's another form of the ultimate sacrifice. If you'd like more information about the Marine Raiders or my father, you can visit his website, usmcraiders.com, or you can check out this QR code over there for his book, Once a Raider. The physical book is available on Amazon. The ebook is also available. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble as well. I'm Louis Marsh, Senior Pastor of River Church in Parker, Arizona. Thank you so much for listening to my father's story today. I'd love to see your responses in the comments below. And we're going to be taking a break now because this marks the end of Season 2, but Season 3 will be coming soon. If you have any thoughts on what area you'd like us to cover, we've done the European and Pacific theaters of World War II, maybe Korea, Vietnam. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Give me a subscribe and a thumbs up, please. I thank you so very much for listening. And until next time, God bless you.